When Pastor Maggie invited me to preach and be with y'all today, she said that I could pick the lesson for the day from which I wanted to preach. And where I currently serve right now, we actually don't use the Revised Common Lectionary. And so I thought, oh gosh, wouldn't it be really cool to return to the Revised Common Lectionary and just preach on like whatever the lessons are for the week? And hey, guess what? There is nothing quite like guest preaching in the week of Matthew, where there is weeping and grinding of teeth. Y'all, 2020 continues to keep on giving. But this wailing and grinding of teeth, it's not the only time that this appears in Matthew's telling of Jesus's life. It actually shows up 4 other times, each time in the context of a parable that Jesus is telling to those around him. Yet there is something that does resonate with me in the world of Jesus's parables. They're about some form of relationship. Parables are not stories of a solitary individual or of a single thing. They are stories about people in some form of relationship with one another, whether it be a relationship that reflects the coming of the realm of God or a relationship that falls well short of the realm of God and definitely needs some divine intervention. The parables, they are deceptively simple, especially since we are 2,000 years removed from the initial telling of these stories. And there is this deep and complicated dialogue that still continues to this day of what does this mean? What does it mean? So when I talk about what does it mean, I mean the it that actually starts us off in today's reading. It is like a wealthy landowner, but what is it? It is the realm of God. Okay, awesome. So what is the realm of God? Honestly, I don't have an exact and concrete answer to this question. When I start imagining the realm of God, it feels like it is a place and a time where there is a true understanding of the breadth and depth of the word reconciliation. It's not just some crappy band aid that attempts to cover up generations of systemic abuse, but that reconciliation. There's a greater communal understanding of that and of the new realities of living into the fullness of who God created each and every single one of us to be. And just thinking about the realm of God and the fullness of who God created me to be and of who God created you to be. Thinking about that sparks my imagination. It makes me think and it makes me wonder, what can we as a community of people be doing to live into such bold new realities, into the here and now, not just the over there maybe someday? So I have my undergraduate degree is in agricultural applied economics. And so with a background in economics, I couldn't help my mind just wondering about the investments in today's reading, also known as the talents in today's reading. So in the new inclusive version of the Bible, we've been given the numbers. The first worker received $5,000, the second received $2,000, and the third received $1,000. We're also told that each worker received this amount according to the worker's ability. And the first two workers, according to their abilities, they were both able to double the investment that they had been given. We're not exactly told how, but we are told that the return on investment that they had been given by the wealthy landowner had doubled due to the efforts of the workers. And then the third worker, well, he put his investment in the dirt. This is where the parable starts to become tricky, at least for me. The wealthy landowner returns and meets with the three workers. When it comes to the first two workers, the landowner puts them in charge of larger affairs. And these first two workers, they are invited into the landowner's joy. But the story takes a turn when the landowner encounters the third worker. Instead of greater matters, instead of sharing joy, we come to assumptions and we come to fear. The third worker reveals their thoughts on the landowner as ruthless and with wrath. The third worker returns the exact same sum of the investment that they received. And then the landowner calls the third worker worthless and lazy. But then, in a way, then asks the worker, is this really what you think of me? That I'm ruthless and full of wrath? The landowner then replies, if this is what you really thought of me, you would have been creative enough to put your investment in the bank, because if I was that ruthless, at least I would have had my investment plus interest. So yeah, it feels like a lot when the parable takes a turn. It's a lot to take in. The change from come and share in my joy to throw this worthless one outside into the darkness where there is wailing and grinding of teeth. So let's zoom out and explore the larger affair. So I told you all that I have a background in economics. I also, not just from the investments, I also looked at this parable from the tension that exists between scarcity and abundance, and how that translates into how we talk about God and how we encounter God. How we talk about God matters. Our interpretation of God matters. And our interpretation of the realm of God matters, which means how we imagine that realm and how we communicate that realm. That has implications in the here and now. The realm of God is a place where I believe that we are reconciled to God and to one another. And it is a space and time where each and every single one of us can live freely and holy, like, holy, but like holy, fully and complete, how God intended for each and every single one of us to be. And as an economist, my God, this feels like an overwhelming abundance. Do we communicate God as a God of abundance? Or do we communicate God as a little g God, as a lifeless idol? A little g God, a lifeless idol, contorts and compartmentalizes and sacrifices. And it's not able to imagine the enormity and creativity of who a big G God can be. The interpretation of a little g God, it doesn't feel like an entity who could create stars, giraffes, hummingbirds, roses, pomegranates, or us. A little g idol is limited to what it is created to be. A little g God is an idol of scarcity. And there's so many scarcities, ironically. Scarcity of freedom, scarcity of creativity, scarcity of imagination, but the one that tears my soul is the scarcity of life. Thinking about all of those different types of scarcity, but that scarcity of life and how that exists in the world in such trying and uncertain times. How can that not make a follower of an abundant God want to wail and grind their teeth? How we talk about God matters, and it matters maybe even more than we could possibly imagine. Imagination, creativity, especially how we communicate who God is in the world, it is really important. And because I was able to encounter individuals of benevolence, of invitation, of risk taking, that's really why I'm able to be with you in worship today, because of the abundance of others and how they communicated that abundance of God with me. And those who communicated that abundance with me, they zoomed out to the larger affair. It wasn't just about burying an investment in the ground, fearing and lacking imagination, because fear and lack of imagination, that places assumptions and preconceived notions on people. And if the communities that I encountered had those assumptions and preconceived notions about me, I don't know if I would be here. But those benevolent communities, they took a risk to imagine a different reality by risking to share with me who God is through sharing their creativity and their imagination. Because assumptions are dangerous things. The assumption from the third worker, that was a harsh interpretation of the landowner. And reading this parable again and again, it was revelatory to realize that the landowner could read differently than harsh. It was a reckoning of sorts, of needing to come to terms with what is being presented. The realization that the landowner was joyful and benevolent with the first two workers, and that the landowner risked entrusting resources with all of the three. And the words of activist and organizer Adrienne Marie Brown, they haunted me in this reading. And she writes in her book, Emergent Strategy, perhaps the most egregious thing that we are taught is that we should just be really good at what's already possible, to leave the impossible alone. What if God left the impossible alone? I don't know, because God is a risk taker. God took a risk in the imagination and creativity of creation. God took a risk in breathing life into that first human. God took a risk in an abundance of imagination in the person of Jesus Christ, risking to embody and incarnate love. God took a risk in actually risking our own rejection, that the embodiment of love divine was crucified, that the embodiment of love divine continues to be crucified today in a myriad of ways, because people can't imagine their lives past idols of fear and scarcity. May we know that how we talk about God in the here and now matters. It matters how people approach the realm of God. May we not be constricted and confined to a scarcity of imagination. May we risk in a generous abundance as God has so risked in a generous abundance with each and every one of us, that we may all together take part in the larger affairs.